Oh, really?
Oh, it's just
DIY.
Okay.
We do make our stuff out.
Okay,
They get the best committees.
We also have the worst rooms as well.
Yeah, even up to
I
those.
haven't been to do anything nice.
They're very nice and they have their own.
and one extra coffee.
Event. And like you're
Not
not
gonna
for lights and dinners and it's a room.
Okay, team,
Probably.
it is Friday, February 21st, this is Natural Resources and Energy, and we're kicking it off this morning with S65 revisited by Mr. Peter Walk.
Good morning, for the record, my name is Peter Walk. As we've talked about before, I am wearing my VIC hat today. I appreciate the opportunity to come back as I asked to do, provide some specific testimony on S65, as I had just received it the day before, the last time I was in here with you. And I also have some opportunity, I think there's some opportunity to clarify some things that I heard from other witnesses and help to create clarity for all and the understanding of at least what I think the bill does. And so to hopefully to ease your consideration of the bill, and some changes that I think will address some of the concerns off the bat that you heard from other parties, that also helps provide some clarity along the way. So without further ado, I want to run through a few slides, and then I do have 5 copies of our draft. I did not make copies for the room, sorry, 17 pages. But it is on the website now. Thank you, Jude. All right. Always want to start with sort of 3 big takeaways. What do we want to leave you with? There's been a lot of different testimony around what S65 does and doesn't do. I want to be very clear from my perspective, S65 is a modest but important step forward, living in with the means that we currently have that continues to drive energy cost savings for Vermonters and Vermont businesses. For 2, we already work together with other energy programs in a complex policy and regulatory environment between what you have asked the energy system to do and what the PUC has asked the energy system to do. We are already working hand in glove with everybody. There are points of challenge at times, but we work through them as we did when Tier 3 was established, because it created direct conflict with programs that we were running. And so we figured it out and we worked it out along the way. I don't see any reason why that can't continue. And we're all held to clear regulatory requirements where there are penalties when we don't meet them. So it is in our best interest always to be working together to figure out how to do it. Also want to be clear that this bill does not have any impact on the EEC rates or the collection thereof, and will continue to lower bills. In fact, as Vermont has started to electrify, we've already seen an impact on EEC rates and overall bills, and we'll go through some of that. I just wanted to take it up for it. This slide is a little bit hard to see. I apologize for the font, but I did want to talk through a few things about what we've heard along the way. One, there's been some concern expressed by our distribution utility partners around the active demand management and storage language that was in the bill. Currently, I think there is already a partnership between the DUs and Efficiency Vermont on demand management, not on the storage side, but the demand management side is really, to me, where there's greatest value because of the ability to interact with customers effectively. That already exists. One thing I might suggest is there is a PUC flexible load management, which is another way to say the demand management side study committee happening currently. They are obligated to produce something before the next 3-year planning cycle for the demand resources plan for the EDUs kicks off. And that's supposed to be July of this year. If you're looking for some information on what they've concluded, I might recommend adding something to the bill, sort of later section that would ask for a report back in session law. Might be a way to consider doing that. But I think you should strike those references because I think they create confusion and concern and don't add much benefit. I also heard from some of our DU partners that there were concerns in the language that there would be a usurpation of the Tier 3 authorities and abilities of the DUs to act. the specific subdivision that's mentioned, and I'll talk about it a little bit more later, only refers to this section and things related to other pieces that aren't the tier 3 chapter or title that we, chapter that we're really talking about, or title that we're talking about. And so I think it's important to know that this language, part of it is the clunkiness of the underlying statute, does not actually impact the ability of the DUs to do this work under tier 3. Additionally, you heard concerns about the removal of the least cost planning language. It is a complicated intermingling between 209 and 218C, but 218C is already referenced several times throughout the 209. Everything is done based on least cost planning. This bill, to my mind, wouldn't have changed that, but I think for clarity purposes, you should add that language back in, and I have a suggested edit there.
Sorry, can you help us remind us what 218C?
218C is the sort of overall least cost planning framework,
Okay.
so that we are making sure that our grid is as affordable as possible for Vermonters.
Okay.
And it's a really important piece and shouldn't be left out, and wasn't left out, but it's, you want to provide clarity as much as possible so folks understand what this bill will and won't do. I think it's important.
So leave in the least cost planning.
Yes, I have a specific edit that I will
Okay.
talk about in a moment, but I think we'll do that. I also heard some concerns from Chair McNamara from the PUC around how this, whether or not the EEC and the amount of the EEC then gets implicated as part of the Global Warming Solutions Act requirements when you make a reference to 10 VSA 578. And so in the edits that I'll provide, I recommend striking the reference to 10 VSA 578 and leaving it as greenhouse gas emissions reductions, which the PUC is already comfortable with managing on their own. There's no need to make that specific tie-in, and if it creates a lack of clarity for our regulators, I would really like to avoid that. Ultimately, I think, as I've said to you before, I don't think this should be the work of climate action should be borne by electric ratepayers alone. You have no other opportunities on your board at this point for consideration of other things, so I think this is still important that we create that alignment and focus on greenhouse gases. But I think it's also important to send a signal to Vermonters that we are not trying to do this on the backs of their electric bills. And so we would actually propose that you extend the cap that's in the bill in perpetuity for the EEC portion of the bill. There is the TEPF funding, as we've talked about, the RGGI and forward capacity market fund fluctuates more because they are market-based collection models. And so the ability to navigate those changes shouldn't be capped in statute, because if there's more money collected, we want more good work to happen, right? But for the electric generated side of the budget, we should make sure that that is clear to Vermonters that is true. And also there was some concern about some of the language that was struck in the bill around coordination with the distribution utilities and the feeling that that was going away. I think that was a drafting error, frankly, or maybe not drafting error, but a omission, as often happens with bills, parts of the statute that don't appear to be being touched get left out of the bill because they would be too long otherwise. There is a section 30 VSA 209F, which goes through all of the obligations that are on the EUs to make sure that they're running programs that meet a myriad of interests, and that the PUC manages us to that. In there, subdivision F5 makes very clear that we are to coordinate with everybody, right? As you'll see in this language, I'll read it out loud because I think it's important. Promote and ensure coordinated program delivery, including coordination with low-income weatherization programs, which are the weatherization agencies we talked about, entities that fund and support affordable housing, you've heard from some of them already, regional and local efficiency entities within the state. We work with folks like NeighborWorks, forget what their current name is, other efficiency programs like BED and BDS, and utility programs. We are doing all of that already. The specific language that was struck was related to how the PUC would evaluate how the EUs should do electrification. and support electrification, that's been done. So again, there are some things that I'll talk about I'll go through in the bill. I think where there was some lack of clarity on your walkthrough with council was there were things that probably should never have been in the underlying statute. They should have been in session law because they were direction to the PUC to do something specific, but didn't affect the underlying law. That's one of those instances. And so that whole section being struck was really about cleaning up the statute, to my mind, to get to a more coherent statute, because as we know, it's already pretty funky, and it'd be good to get rid of those things that are no longer type out. And there are a couple other things in there that I'd like to mention, but I want to start there because I think so some of that clarification is important to understanding where we are and what moving forward. So I also want to go quickly into, I'm going to try to move fast because I know we have limited time. I want to get it. We work very closely with the DUs now in a complex energy program environment. We operate specifically with the DUs, primarily in the heat pump space, a joint program. It's easy for customers to use. They only have one entry point into that process. It's consistent and simple for supply chain partners that they are only sending an invoice to one entity to be able to process that money. So regularly I see large collection incentives going back out to the FW Webs and Granite Groups of the world who are supplying the equipment. It really works to maximize fossil fuel savings across programs. And it gives that market signal that we are acting statewide and we want contractors to plus up their businesses to be ready to go to work in support of the taxes that the contractors are asking for. And it minimizes that competition and reduces the costs. There's no reason to create competition between the efficiency run and the DUs because that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't create a good customer experience. We're trying to make sure that we're working together across the board. And if, as we built the infrastructure within efficiency run, it allows DU partners to be able to access that infrastructure easily and at a low cost along the way. Here's a quick look at what the overall participation in those joint programs is for 2025. We run multiple heat pump programs, ductless mini splits, the ducted whole house systems, air to water, which is sort of a emerging technology we hope will grow more because of all of the hydronic heating systems in Vermont. Ground source heat pumps, wooden pellet stoves, heat pump hot water heaters, and then really some great combined support for customized support for Vermont businesses who are where there's an opportunity to leverage both tier 3 and efficiency dollars to be able to help them do bigger projects and get more bang for the buck. What we do in that process is processing rebates for the DUs. We train contractors. We maintain the point of sale system and report systems. We manage the qualified products list so people know what they can buy and what's considered efficient enough to earn the credit. We work to support that and recruit that statewide network of contractors and suppliers. We market those technologies, and we're here to provide that third party unbiased support for customers who have questions.
I have a question,
Yeah.
but maybe you're gonna get to this in the next slide. But I'm wondering if you could help us understand how the money flows.
Sure. Essentially what happens is there's a statewide program that we administer, and once we know what the number of pieces of equipment that have been sold for distribution utilities customers or members, right? Want to be critical to our co-op and municipal members. Those members, we then provide that DU, whether if they're participating, with an invoice that says, here's your portion thereof. And so that then gets billed back to DUs, they provide that money, and then they get the fossil fuel avoidance savings that they use to comply with TIF.
So it's really your program that they are paying into.
Yes, yes, and it's a joint program that we are operating together,
Fair.
But yes, but the most of the backbone is on a business model, and certainly the market transformation side of the house is for sure.
Okay.
And as you'll see, I wanted to note in this slide quickly, the ductless heat pump system you'll see in a moment is the most popular program. And right now that program is being offered statewide. So everybody gets to participate. It is only a joint program in GMP and STO. In VACWAC and VIPSA territories, we offer we pick up the remainder of the incentive via the TEPF budget, the thermal budget, so we are picking up those greenhouse gas savings, those fossil fuel savings elsewhere. But it is as we talked about, it's a limited pot of funds. And so say if, and it works because the territories of VACWAC and the VIPSA members combined is small enough that we can maintain that budget. If Green Mountain Power, for example, were to decide that they wanted to withdraw from that system, we would not, I don't believe we would be able to cover the keeping it a statewide program through the TEPF budget alone.
So it is collaborative.
It is collaborative, yep. I'm gonna skip over that slide because honestly, it kind of repeats some things and we're running out of time, so I'm not moving fast enough. I also want to just highlight sort of the importance of those programs.
You have till 10.
Yeah.
Okay, you're just.
I'm sure you're gonna have
You're
questions,
so
so I'm gonna ask you. Yeah.
Good, you're good. I'll make sure.
Want to read? As you can see, the various heat pump programs are some of the most popular ways in which the DUs are meeting their tier 3 savings. I think it's just important to recognize the scale of that. Right, you have almost 75% or 70% of those happening, and I believe the other custom is a lot of that business to business support work. And just by way of scale, one of the things that you did for the tier 3 program was allow them to bank credits so they can do more work in 1 year and be able to continue to take credit for that in the future. And so that's enabled them to get really cheap, cost-effective savings. Seems a little like wonky and nerdy, but I think you all can bear with me. The column on the left is obviously distribution utilities. The middle column is what their tier 3 target was under the renewable energy standard for 2023. And then the column on the right is what component of that did the joint programs contribute to. And as you can see, for an entity like Washington Electric, it was almost 300% of their target for that year. They derived more credits through other programs, but they now have banked credits because of that joint program. So the ability to work together has been successful over the last since tier 3 was established. Also, on the demand management we call it flexible load management side, we are often interacting with business customers for the best opportunities for significant savings in the flexible load management. For just a quick description of flexible load management, it's moving power use from a time of day when it is most impactful to the grid to when it is least impactful to the grid, right? As we think about right sizing our grid, we can smooth that load curve that I'm sure TJ has showed you. That is great, right? So any opportunity we have to do, this is a really cool one. There's a bakery in Brattleboro. I don't think anybody from Brattleboro here, but
It's so.
It came to us with the wanting.
Yeah. It's gluten-free.
Gluten-free.
It's gluten-free, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I got distracted.
Gluten-free conversation.
Yeah.
That came to us for some efficiency work that they wanted to get done. Because of what we knew in working with them in the past, we could bring in other partners to talk about how do we make this project bigger and save you more money in the end. So in the end, they were able to shave 20% of their load by using their freezer as a thermal battery. Which I'm sure for the physics teacher at the head of the table, that sounds very cool, but it's essentially using the energy stored in that freezer to reduce the need to keep it, sort of get it really cold and then let it warm up a little bit when the demand on the grid is higher. the efficiency savings that we were able to do was able to drive a 55% annual energy savings in their operations. That's great. But we were able to bring in some additional savings for the customers with partnership with GMP of 3 to 5K a year. And then as they're transitioning to the newest version of their FLM programs, that customer can make potentially up to 4 or 5 times more than they're making now annually, because it's of such value to the grid that we're moving that load. So as we think about the ability to meet our goals, it's not just about efficiency and reducing demand and putting new equipment on, it's about where we put that load on the grid so that we're not having to buy additional generation or purchase dirtier power from the peaker units that are part of the grid. All right, you'll please just bear with me a little bit of history. So these are residential EEC rates over the last 7 years. They've dropped 21% in dollar for dollar terms and 42% during that time in inflation adjusted terms. As the cost of everything has gone way up, the EEC continues to grow. And so that is happening now under current circumstances, as we are already doing great work in conjunction with the DUs to drive down energy use and emissions reductions. And this is,
Sorry, was that graph is inflation adjusted or it's not inflation?
that is not inflation.
Non-inflation.
Non-inflation.
So it doesn't count.
So it doesn't count, so that's why I added that friends there on the fact that from an inflation adjusted in real dollars, we're talking about a 42% decline in the rate of these. And this is just a quick snapshot of the customer bill savings over the course of the lifetime of efficiency model. The blue bars are the electric savings, the orange bar is the TEPF savings, which came online starting in 2009 when Vermont joined Reggie and started developing that revenue. So I think we're at sort of $3.7 billion worth of overall savings directly to Vermonters. The bill still requires those energy savings to occur. So I was trying to figure out a way to show this effectively to the committee, but the number of competing priorities that you have directed the PUC to manage, that the PUC directs us to manage, is staggering, right? It ends up in that spaghetti chart that you've seen. We are all capable of managing the competing priorities. Adjusting those priorities within the statute doesn't change the fact that business as usual is managing competing priorities. So all you are saying in the bill is, yes, thank you for managing those priorities. And as we seek to tackle the climate emissions of the state and make it more affordable for Vermonter, within your existing budget, we should make greenhouse gases a priority. You saw this slide from TJ, so I'm gonna go directly to the edits because, again.
We have a question here.
Oh,
So things are moving along according to plan, and then we have a cold snap. You know, everything that you're doing obviously is working because now we got cold weather and snow and everything back. So when will you capture that data? I mean, how did that cold snap, the polar vortex affect everything you guys have done, and when will you know?
Certainly, I mean, I'm gonna take your question broadly. One of the things that we have to manage to is winter peak, right? Which we've been in a lot of winter peak scenario over the past. So one of the things that we look at every project for is it actually gonna impact winter peak? Because if we can have it drive down winter peak, as we know that's more of an issue, especially as we're bringing heat pumps on board, then we're able to make sure the grid doesn't need more generation on board. So that's sort of how we're doing it. Data for this year, we won't have for some time, but you know, sort of cumulative data, but certainly it is something that the PUC is determined in sort of understanding your direction within underlying statute. We are working towards meeting those goals very effectively now. And so making sure that we are driving down peak winter demand, peak summer demand, and many of the other factors that sort of come into play to make the grid work as effectively as possible.
So do we have a computer program just sitting there keeping all that
We just
data.
got some really smart people in the
AI?
back with, no, there's modeling software that we've used for years that looks at how we build a portfolio of programs. And then each individual potential project gets looked at for what its impact is on different measures. And if it's pencils out, right, it proves to be cost effective and it has real bang for the buck in certain areas, then we figure out how to make it cost effective for the customer. And that's how a lot of that work gets driven, but it's always about balancing. So when we see something, you know, if there are a bunch of projects that happen that are awesome for summer peak, but they're not great for winter peak, we're gonna start working with customers to find a way to fill that bucket back up. All that, because we're trying to land as close to 100% of our goals and as close to zero of our budget as possible, so that we're balancing the best work possible. We love to go above 100% as much as possible. We're gonna drive as much as possible to drive that cost-effective energy efficiency. The one thing I did want to share with TJ's slide is there's been some question about sort of if there's no need to do this for electric savings, then let's just lower the EC. The department's own analysis, and that's the table on the right, is a continued need for energy efficiency work. The blue line is all of the energy efficiency that could be done. The orange line is the work that is cost effective. The gray line is, all right, if we rallied everybody and got everybody going door to door, this is what's possible. And then the yellow line is a reflection of the way in which you've asked us to structure our programs, what can we actually meet, right? Making sure that we're utilizing hometown contractors, making sure that our supply chain is robust, making sure that we're partnering and making sure we're validating all the work we've done. That you can't meet all of those higher bars if you're operating within those parameters. So as you can see, there is no perspective that the available energy efficiency work will decline. So it is not there's still need for this efficiency charge. We talk all the time about working ourselves out of a job, right? In an ideal world, I talked about this when I was the DEC commissioner with our air quality team. Your job is to work yourself out of a job, right? So we get to the point where we're not needed anymore. This chart shows very clearly from the department that we're still needed, and that every year they do a potential, or every performance period they do a potential study, and this gets contracted out to third parties. This is verifiable third party analysis. All right.
Oh, we have one more
So,
question,
for you.
and then we probably.
So S65 is a correction of the plan. We're still driving forward. It's just the plan is changed.
Sort of, I think of it as like an internal course correction. Is that a fair? Yeah.
Let me share these around.
Thank you.
There we go. Sorry you didn't get these well in advance, but I think it was important to make sure our thoughts were fully in order. I'm going to do this page by page because I do think there are some moments where I would like to highlight some of those areas that I talked about that I think having some committee clarity on what certain actions in the bill does is important. And as I said, I think the last time I've been doing this job for almost 3 years now, I am just getting to the point where I sort of understand the pieces of the statute. It is really complicated and confusing because it's built on the back of other things and then other things that add into it. So first off the bat gets to the edit around removing demand management and energy storage from any, you will not see that in our proposed edits anywhere. That all gets struck. Line 17 on page 1 is
and why?
Because we're already doing the that flexible load management side, and there is a working group underway. As I mentioned, I would happy provide a piece of language, but I'm pretty sure Ellen can do this for you very easily. That just said we'd like a report back from that working group, or from the PUC who is directing that working group. So that's one option. for the greenhouse gas emissions under 10 VSA 578, again, that's the reference directly to the greenhouse gas emissions reductions requirements that were created by the Global Warming Solutions Act. There was some confusion that this would lead to sort of never-ending growth of the EEC, and to make that clear, I think we're tying the greenhouse gas emissions to priorities of greenhouse gas emissions, but it's not inclusive of every single emission that the state is obligated itself for under the global warming system.
Yeah, sure.
So this was in the original draft too, so it's not one of your changes, but. It says on line 18, consumers or the ratepayers, aren't the consumers and the ratepayers the same people?
I have questions about that, but I'm happy, like, at myself, I haven't quite figured out what that test means, right? Because ultimately, it's a cost effectiveness test that we would have to consider. There's an open question there, I think, that you have to consider. There are people who are fully off the grid. Do they get to benefit from these programs, right, if they're not ratepayers, but they're consumers of other things? That piece is a little unclear to me. I might,
Good point.
I just don't know what that distinction is, and if it's trying to focus on the individuals who are having the work done, are those the consumers and are ratepayers the more broad group? I don't know, I just don't know what the distinction is.
Right, like the consumers of the beneficial electrification.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, so that's a smaller group than ratepayers overall, but I don't know, so.
Thank you for noting that.
yeah, I mean, it's overall that change is a good one because it makes, well, sort of however you decide to do it. Mostly, it's really getting to the thrust of it, right? This is both beneficial to our efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and beneficial to the ratepayers themselves.
Well, it says or, so that's the other
Oh.
thing, should it be an and, I don't know. So, these are subtle.
You're,
That's good.
that's a good catch. I was in, well. No, it's the or only is the consumers or ratepayers. The and is before the beneficial.
And beneficial.
So however you decide
Oh,
to do
and-
if consumers or
Yeah.
ratepayers. It's good for one of those and good for greenhouse gas.
Yes.
So I'm comfortable with that, or some of that particular one.
Okay.
Page 2. Again, electrification is something that the EU is already doing. But the active demand management and energy storage piece, we're also doing, but as we mentioned before, you don't need to include that here. And I think it definitely raises some questions for the distribution utilities that don't need to be raised. No changes on page 3 from our recommendation. The next page is questions on page 4. And this is subdivision D, starting on line 3. This is the budget cap, the permanent budget cap on dollars collected for the energy efficiency initiative. So it's a little, the language is a little more constrained than it might need to be because of the fact that the budget will now be combined under this bill. The thermal budget and the electric budget. And so we need to make sure clear that the thermal budget fluctuates, right, based on revenue. And so you wouldn't want to set a budget for that revenue wasn't meeting, right? Because that would be confusing for the PUC to approve a budget where there wasn't enough money. And if there were more dollars being collected by those revenue, you would want, I would think, the energy efficiency utility doing that good work with more dollars, making more products available to promoters. So that's the reason why there's a specific recognition that the portion of the budget collected by the EEC should be kept, and the TBF should be allowed to fluctuate. That's why it's not just like the budget is capped. Line 12, again, striking the GWSA reference. Flipping over to page 5. This is just more of a clerical thing. You removed electric from the electric efficiency fund on line 15. removed it in other places, and this is more of a consistency edit than anything else. No changes on page 6. Moving to page 7. The first change on line 3 is just putting it back to charge, because that was, as Ellen said, it was a miscommunication and editing something, I'm not sure which said. This is where we add the reference to HEC back in, so it's societally cost effective for greenhouse gas emissions reduction and consistent with the principles of least cost planning, integrated planning that's applied into HEC of this tool. So.
And you think that is doable?
Oh yeah, we do that. I think it was already implied by other sections of statute, but when it's implied, let's make it explicit. Cause that makes,
Like everyone.
there are enough regulatory back and forth that I would like to limit that proposal. Moving to page 8, again, removing energy storage references. And I propose striking the word beneficial, because you use electrification without word beneficial in other places than just for consistency's sake. Moving to page 9, there is no proposed edit here, but this refers to the section that some of your testimony on from the distribution utilities around being concerned about a lack of coordination, because that is referenced in part of this section. This is the work that's already been done by the PUC to determine that the EUs should pursue electrification as a measure. That makes sense. So, in the instance of so our heat pumps are supported by the EEC currently. That is a beneficial electrification process. It is also an energy efficiency process, because the model that you might have put in, that you could go buy on Amazon, isn't the one we want you to buy. So just like a refrigerator, there are lots of things available. We want you to buy the Energy Star one. Same sort of model, and that's how we fund that. So the electrification is happening, and that work has been done by the piece. So again, I think that probably should have been in session law to begin with, rather than in statute. But I would, I think continuing to remove that and relying on that reference that I mentioned to the collaboration that we do with everybody in F5 to be willing to stand in the place of the specific requirement of this section for coordination of fees. All right. Going to page 12, you haven't taken much testimony on the equity and justice component of the bill. I landed here several times during my last testimony, but I think this is incredibly valuable and important work.
Wait, can
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Sorry.
just trying to crosswalk it with the notes I have in
Yep.
my other draft. So paragraph, I think it's little B I just.
Page, you know?
Bottom
there.
of page 10. I think you just said this
Yeah.
coordination would already happens anyway, so.
Yes, and it's already required in section
It's already required
Yep.
elsewhere.
in 30 VSA 209 F5.
30 BSA 2.5.
Yes,
That, okay,
Okay,
little.
so just because that's going away doesn't mean that the.
Yeah, that coordination only was required for that specific subdivision or the section that has already been completed for the evaluation of electrification by the energy efficiency utilities. That this is part of the that existed pre-tier 3 and work that has already been new for that question, Senator Harden.
Yeah.
So back to the equity provisions, you haven't taken much this money. I think I'm comfortable with the percentages where they stand now. This work is incredibly important. If we're trying to make this transition and where we are now affordable to Vermonters, the ability to increase the level of support for Vermonters who need it most is really important. And the way you have set up the sort of quote unquote incentive structure for where we focus our programs if I was a crass, cold-hearted, for-profit entity, I would try to limit as much work at there as possible, because there's more cost-effective savings to be had in big businesses. But that's part of the value you've created in creating a third-party nonprofit utility model to run this on your behalf. Because we are trying to do that balance, but PUC is really good at holding us accountable to that balance. And so this says to you, we're gonna pull on that, those scales a little bit, typically pool, I think as you described it, Senator Watson, so that we are helping those who need it most. Many Vermonters, as you saw with the energy burden report, who can afford to move the heat pumps, are doing so already. So if we don't want to leave people behind, this section is incredibly important. So that's 12 and 13. The strikeouts that start on 14 and move into page 15 are just a reminder, those got moved elsewhere in the statute to help make clear what the budget, the full budget for the work was. If they're not going away. And so just wanted to flag that for you. That's page 15, I don't see any changes. Page 16, again. Energy storage it should be struck. That is not something that the EU should be doing. That is the review of the distribution utilities. Be able to do that work. Again, where you see the three little asterisks, which implies that there's parts of this on 16 where there are parts of the statute that have been truncated for the purposes of the bill. That is where you see section F at the top, and you see one and 2, where changes were made in the bill. But there is a full list of lots of, I believe it goes up to 14 of all of the things that you said, even though you're doing cost-effective energy efficiency, we also want you to do X, Y, and Z, and A, B, C, D, and that one. So 30 VSA 209 F5 in the section the portion that I read to you earlier is what requires us to coordinate with these. And frankly, we wouldn't be able to operate without that anyways. We have MOUs with them across the board and lots of different things. Flipping to page 17, which is the final page, only change that we recommend is the, again, same 10 VSA 578 reference. I did want to highlight subdivisions 2 and 3 of that were struck, that there were some questions on. The statewide information clearinghouse, the Public Service Department created that many years ago. Again, should have been section law, not statute. So that let's clean that up so we don't have confusion as to where that stands. That work has been done. Same thing with subdivision 3. They established some of those interim goals for the hot stock was was asked for in the early 2010s. So for goals for 2017 and 2020. So that work has been done. Again, if you wanted to add something about a report back from the FLM working group that the PUC directed to occur in the public service, or I believe the Public Service Department asked for to happen, and the PUC blessed it. The Public Service Department is leading it. All the DUs, the EUs at the table trying to figure out how we do this effectively. I'd recommend a report back from that group if that's what you're interested in. I would not add management and storage to the purposes of the EU. And that is my testimony.
We even have time for questions.
I told you I needed to talk fast.
I'm still trying to crosswalk it, but what I find so hard.
It's always challenging to make a new draft of the bill and having all that.
That's okay. No, that's okay.
And then lots of subdivisions.
One note, if I might, I might have a couple, but page 3. And this may not be a question for you, but I'll just ask it just in case you have thoughts. I had on the whole concept of I guess the processed fuel on page line 5 of your draft. Ellen added a definition, and I guess this is probably not for you, but whether or not that was a good definition, as specific, you know.
I think it's probably fine for that. You may want, I mean, essentially, right now you have a thermal energy and process fuels fund, and you have no definition for process fuel. And so there's an open question as to what you mean there. I think this covers most of it. I'm happy to go back and ask our really nerdy folks about whether or not they think that covers the full gamut of
Okay,
fuels, if that would be helpful.
sure.
So,
I mean, it's good just to make sure that that's the right definition of it. Then on page. The sort of. The funding mechanism on page 5,
yes.
can you walk through that a little bit more, explain how that works?
So this is, again, I mentioned this when I talked about what was being struck earlier, but this is the funding that supports the thermal energy work. So as we're thinking about a combined budget, we would recommend, I like this change to move it up, to bring it all together in one structure. The 4A is the for capacity market
Right.
work. 4B is Reggie. So that is the proceeds of the state gets the regional greenhouse gas emissions auction. And then C is sort of a catch-all for if the state wanted to simply direct excess general funds through a mechanism, so it would already have a path to be spent. That's the sort of thing we're talking about.
And then it's called supplemental funding, because this is the funding outside of the east.
And again, it's more of a history lesson than it is a functional
Okay,
difference,
it's a history
right?
lesson.
Because the EC came first. And then the TPF work, thermal work came second in 2009. As Ready was being stood up and Bradley was coming in. And so it's called supplemental. You could change that heading from, sort of thermal component funding or something. I'm not sure what you would want to do, but like, it's not really supplemental. It is fundamental to the work that we're doing. And a huge part of our regulated budget. So I would if you want to elevate that in status to something other than supplemental.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question about that as well? So my understanding is that that these pots of money, like what you can do with them is somewhat limited,
Yes,
right? And so it is helpful to combine them.
yes, yep.
Yeah,
And so that we can support projects that customers want to do that are gonna save them money and save energy, right? And you recognize this as a legislature in the creation of the energy savings account program. Where you allow the largest business customers who participate in that program to find projects that are either thermal projects or electric projects, because there's value to them, and this is consistent with that.
thank you. Any other?
Okay, so page, sorry.
No, you're good, yeah, carry on.
On page 7 in the original draft. Oh, here it is, page 6. Can you explain a little bit more about what fuel neutral manner means in this context?
That is precisely that budget balancing that we're talking about. So as we as the efficiency work draws upon the electric efficiency charge and the TEF revenue and any other funds in that catch-all. Let's use that as one budget to pursue the most bang for our collective buck. Rather than having projects on the table because they don't fit conveniently into one of those spaghetti lines,
Okay,
right? And so there are large commercial projects, for example, where the thermal funding we have is insufficient to help them do fuel switching.
mhm,
And so if we really want to do, we talk a lot about residences in terms of climate action. But our businesses are right there with us and they're a huge part of our energy use. And we all want them to stick around, right? And so we want to make those as cost effective as possible for them to do. And so to be able to harness both pots to be able to do that work, I think is an incredibly valuable tool. So that in a fuel neutral manner is just an artful way of saying, take the collections and make them one budget and figure out how to design programs that best meet the needs as you've laid out in terms of greenhouse gas as a priority, but then achieving all of the ratepayer and other benefits that are associated with that work.
mhm.
So, and to really say, drive, right? Drive and do the best possible work you can.
Okay.
Maybe drive an electric vehicle.
Oh, is there
So,
more?
I
talking
think
about
I've got,
Okay,
businesses, but we're talking about, what about government? How about government, what's the mandate for them?
So you've created many programs to support municipal governments. We treat them as if they're large commercial industrial users, right? Because thinking about a wastewater treatment facility in a town, that's usually the largest energy user, period. And so the work we can do there has tremendous taxpayer value, has huge value for the city themselves, as the city or town as they're trying to manage that load. So that work is incredibly important. The state is another big member. We have that you directed collaboration between BGS and Efficiency Vermont we support the work. Their sort of employees who are doing that work in exchange for the verifiable savings that we can then attach to our regulated work. So there's lots of coordination and collaboration. You specifically designed the PERP, I believe it is, to really help municipalities address their high energy costs and be able to work through those budgets. And so we've been partnering through that process to help make the two align to be able to, again, join programs, wanting to make it seamless for customers.
Well, on the state side, I remember last year I saw the BGS list of state government buildings that were leased or owned that didn't have anybody in them. So is there some kind of a mechanism to get that number of unused buildings down? Is that?
As a resident of Montpelier, I'd love to see some economic activity occur in those buildings that are genius. But as an efficiency measure, I think the sale of that building is probably the most effective use.
I want to come back to this, in the fuel neutral manner, because I think I'm wondering this out loud, if it feels like it needs some additional language to just clarify what
Yeah.
it's talking about.
Okay.
And so,
We're
because like I misremembered it.
it's
Yeah,
page five.
Yeah, so, female opera, because it is, I think it's like in the context of the sentence. And having the background, like understand like what it is trying to do. But I think it might make sense to add, so in a fuel neutral manner, related to the source of the funds. Is that?
I think that's a relatively easy change. Can I get back to you? I can send you a sentence later this afternoon, probably that has
Yeah,
recommended.
to me, it wasn't clear if it was the money that's fuel
Right,
neutral
or
or the
the-
work that's
yeah.
fuel neutral.
Right.
And I
Got
think there's,
I think that's agreed.
yeah, okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
my perspective is that it's the work that is fuel neutral.
Oh, well, what you described was to me sounded like the money.
Well, the work we're gonna pursue the most effective projects, the work, and we're gonna fund it from the sort of full pot. like,
Okay, well, then
It all,
you really need to work on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's-
yeah,
okay. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, any other questions?
No, I think this is really helpful.
Yeah, this is really helpful, and I'm, hopeful with this, I mean, this draft, I feel like addresses a lot of the concerns that we heard through, the testimony of the last week. So I'm gonna just take a little prerogative with the legislative council to work with them to incorporate some of these edits, and so that we can start, next week with, something that I think is, hopefully addresses, some of those concerns, and then we'll start from there. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, if you edit, incorporate language.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll clarify and stuff like that.
I understand my side.
Also, this is just one other thing, but, again, in like reading through it again, page 1, line 5. I feel like we should just call it greenhouse gas emission projects, just to be clear that we're not talking about sulfur salts.
If it would, please, Chair, I can resend, I will just resend this document as a Word document.
Okay.
To you.
Yeah.
And the committee says, with that addition.
Yep.
And then, proposed edits on the children. It's,
Amazing. Thank you so much.
right,
Okay.
thank you for your time today.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to my micro machine voice.
Appreciate your work on this. So to be continued. And.
Make it sound so easy.
It's been doing it a long time.
Talking, yes.
Go ahead.
You know, we all have.
Really quality.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
All right, and hello, we are joined by a number of folks, so welcome. Yeah, switch gears a little bit, and so welcome.
Hey, I'm Denise.
Oh, Denise, okay.
Yeah,
I'm just
Yeah.
staff support.
Okay.
Hold on, that's fine.
She's not a staff support.
No worries, no worries.
She's incredible.
So, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, and I know you have a number of other folks who may, do you just want to ask, or are other?
No, other people are gonna jump in,
Okay.
mostly our experts. I'll sit down and introduce myself. We have a couple people online. Yeah.
So maybe we can start with like a little round of introduction of ourselves.
Great.
And then we'll turn
I
it
can
into
also hand this out.
tell us about
That's
the
why I guess we should be one of them.
Lake Champlain future.
This was advisory committee on the future of like.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for helping me give the name.
There's
So,
a lot of letters.
Yeah.
Words all together.
yeah, fair enough. And Senator Hunt.
Hi, it's so nice to see you. As you know, I'm Senator Ruth Hardy from the Abs.
Secretary Wayne's from the Rollins.
Nice to meet you.
And Watson from the Washington District.
And
So, Barbara, the Bennington Senate District, got back from Calgary.
well, thank you.
Do you have Jude?
Oh, sorry.
Hi, I'm Jude Newman, the committee assistant. Can I, are you gonna introduce?
Yes, I'm
yourself?
gonna introduce
Okay.
myself. So I'm Denise Smith. And I'm the chair of what is the Lake Champlain Citizens Advisory Committee. For Vermont, so kind of a little bit of context, if you're new to this, to what we do, we are one of 3 CACs. There's one in Vermont, New York, and Quebec. And we work collaboratively together on various ideas and things impacting Lake Champlain. Our charge as a committee, and we're all appointed by the governor, so you should know about us. We've been around since 1988. 88. This is 1988. We've been around, and our charge as a committee is to bring an action plan to the legislature every year. And we also meet with the administration. Most of what we do during the year is get input from citizens around the lake. I live in St. Albans and have been involved with water quality issues in Lake Champlain for well over a decade now. And in the action plans, we're gonna break it out for you, and different people are gonna speak to the different sections within the action plan. And we'll definitely open it up for questions. One of the things that I like to say when I present is what we do for Lake Champlain is really important, but it also impacts all of the other water bodies in the state of Vermont. So Lake Champlain is, you know, the gem. Over 50% of our land in Vermont flows into Lake Champlain through the various tributaries and rivers. But what we do there and any kind of policy changes that we make there can also impact lakes around the state. So we're really committed to that. One of the things that you'll notice in our action plan this year is we're really focusing on what we do for clean water are the same things that we need to do to mitigate and adjust to the weather patterns, the flooding patterns that we're seeing in Vermont, specifically around attenuating water, keeping water upstream, and not so that it comes downstream and disrupts the lives of people by taking out homes and businesses. And so there's a lot of mutually beneficial things that we've identified in our action plan this year that can benefit both clean water, so that we have clean drinkable water in Lake Champlain, as well as provide support for our climate change that we're seeing in the state. I'm gonna pass it to Andrew Milliken. So everybody who's presenting today is a member of our commission. And everybody's gonna speak, will be done in half an hour. We've got this nailed down, we've been doing it for years. We used to come in with like an 80-page report, now we've got like a 4-page kind of summary of what we know to be the best practices to help reduce, to help keep our waters clean. But I'm gonna pass it over to Andrew, who's gonna speak next, and he's online. Andrew, go ahead and introduce yourself. I'm happy to, should I just stay here? Okay.
Good morning, Andrew Milliken, member of the Vermont Citizens Advisory Committee for Lake Champlain. Make sure you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thanks for this opportunity. Sorry I can't be there in person today. And I am gonna get out on skis after this meeting, just so you know, but happy to be with you this morning. So I'm gonna start by talking about an overall priority action or theme that we have in our 2025 action plan related to advancing flood mitigation and climate adaptation and resilience. And we're doing that through riparian, wetland, and floodplain restoration and conservation, aquatic connectivity, and agriculture and land use practices that reduce runoff. The fortunate thing is a lot of the same actions that we would take to address climate change impacts have multiple co-benefits. Things like improving habitats for fish, wildlife, and plants, improving water quality to Lake Champlain and other water bodies, and also just including both the natural and community resilience through these same set of actions. And I want to note that the recently passed Flood Safety Act 121 is a really critical piece of this. It's an important step towards increasing flood resilience in the face of climate change. But additional investments and actions are needed to ensure that Lake Champlain and its watershed and other water bodies and their watersheds are resilient to climate change impacts. In this action plan, we're actually under this overall theme, we're recommending 4 focus areas, and I'll discuss 2 of them related to riparian and floodplain restoration, and then Breck will address an additional 2. So the first action I'll just mention does relate to riparian and floodplain restoration. Basically, the set of actions that are needed to conserve and restore floodplains and wetlands and riparian areas in the watersheds of Lake Champlain and other water bodies in Vermont. You know, these areas, these actions are often called something called nature-based solutions. And basically what that means is what we're trying to do is conserve and restore these natural systems to let them do what they're really good at, which is to increase resiliency to change, including to climate change, and address water quality impacts by storing water and all those things that they can do well if they are intact and working well. So these nature-based solutions are a fairly cost-effective, important way to address climate change and have these important co-benefits, particularly to water quality to Lake Champlain. To help make sure that these nature-based solutions are being implemented, we are recommending additional investments in nature-based solutions through full staffing and collaboration between DEC and across DEC programs, and also with Vermont Fish and Wildlife, and ask that through your discussions this year that you're hopefully helping to maintain the timeline of the flood safety and that it includes the integration of floodplain and river corridor management as part of the set of actions. The second resilience sort of focus area that I'll mention is under the broad theme of aquatic connectivity. And under that, the two things that are really critical is that we are assessing and, where possible, removing dams in our river systems, and also assessing and hopefully upgrading all of our road stream crossings, our culverts that are running under roads and railroads. And these two sets of actions are really critical to restore habitat and connectivity, reduce erosion and sediment loading, and include community and flood resilience. And really, those are critical actions to help in adaptation to climate change. We're really asking for continued support for these programs. And I guess I'll just, a side note is additional, or certainly at least stable, funding for these programs seems particularly important now, with the possibilities that some of the federal funding that has supported these programs may not be at the level that it has been in the past. And with that, I will pass it to Breck to talk about a couple more actions under this overall theme of climate resilience.
Thanks, Andrew, and good morning. I am also a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning, and I'm sorry that I can't be there with you. My name is Breck Bowden. I am a recently retired professor from the Rubenstein School at the University of Vermont, where I led federal programs that supported research and education on watershed science and planning. And I want to follow up on two other of the focus areas that are in our climate, that are in our Citizens Advisory action plan, agricultural working lands and developed lands. In the last few years, since 2016, we've been the state has been increasing investments in local technical assistance programs for on-farm pollution prevention projects designed to reduce phosphorus and a lot of other things that run off from our agriculture and working lands. However, in the floods in 2023 and 2024, farmers experienced more than $18.5 million of losses due to flooding. The state provided $2.1 million of funding to the meat, maple, and produce industry, and received to recover from floods in 2023, and received 522 applications requesting $43.6 million, so nearly 20 times what was available. And then again in 2024, we had floods, and the state made available through the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative Board $2.3 million of funding. For that program, there were $16.2 million of requests, so 7 or 8 times what was available. And what this underscores is the critical need for support to farmers and others on working lands. Clearly, farmers want to do what they can to prevent off-farm impacts of their operations, but they need technical and financial assistance to do this. And so our first ask of you is to support funding that's going to help agricultural producers to continue to provide a vibrant local food system as we try to achieve our climate and water quality goals on working lands. The fourth and last area of action in this initial area that we're talking about that Andrew introduced is on developed land. Here we have problems with failing wastewater facilities and septic systems that are being further stressed by the intense rain events that we're experiencing in recent years. And it's important that the state continue to support improvements to public infrastructure, including these facilities, but also bridges, roadways, stormwater facility, and so forth. So we have a number of asks in this area. The first is that you support efforts to limit construction or development in vulnerable river corridors. This speaks back to the natural assets that Andrew was talking about a moment ago. The other is that you support efforts to improve failing municipal infrastructure. And just by way of example, I live in Burlington, and on March 4th, Burlington is going to vote on 2 water infrastructure bonds that together total $172 million, and that in 5 years are projected to double the rates that homeowners are paying for water. And this is all to fix what are systemic problems in our wastewater and drinking water systems. Now, Burlington may be able to afford this, but smaller communities are facing similar infrastructure needs and have far fewer resources. And so it's important that resources be made available to them. We have additional asks that you support the Healthy Homes Initiative, which provides financial assistance to residential property owners for them to repair and replace failing or inadequate on-site wastewater systems. And that you, if the opportunity arises, that you consider creating an inventory of septic systems, especially for those that are near water bodies. Something like that does not exist currently in Vermont. And that you support initiatives to be proactive in providing education, oversight, and outreach for people about home septic systems. And I'll leave you with one context for this. Across the lake, in the Lake George Park Commission, they instituted a mandatory septic inspection system for properties that were within 500 feet of a lake or 100 feet of a stream. The first year of this inspection system began in 2023, and they found that 54% of the inspected systems required replacement or repair. And so I think we can probably expect that we will have a similar experience here if we were to dig into this. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to the next person.
It's me again. I'm gonna be brief because we still have a couple more people or things to talk about. My last 2 are the prioritized land use and development that reduces water quality impacts. Very similar to what people are saying, but really one of the things that we're noticing is that there isn't consistent regulatory enforcement and support or resources or technical support for developers, farmers, and woodland owners to ensure management of the sound management and healthy soils and clean water. So that's one of the things that we would love to see more of, is just consistent regulatory approaches to these different things. As well as increase the flexibility of the types of projects. So we have a really wonderful clean water fund, but the flexibility of the projects that are able to be funded by those Hillary Solomon, who's not with us, talks often about the gullies and farm fields. So farmers who have these big gullies are trying to figure out how not to lose their soil. And unfortunately, the Clean Water Fund doesn't fund those types of projects. And so we're really looking for more flexibility on how those funds that we as Vermonters pay for through the property transfer tax, which we want to see continue, by the way. But we want to see more flexibility in that program for people. And then the final thing, and we say this every year, we've been saying it for years, is just this equitable access to the lake, specifically in the southern part of the lake. There's a lot of private property along the lake. There isn't great public access for non-motorized enjoyment of the lake. And what we know is when people enjoy a place, they're more likely to take care of it and support the health of it. And so that's really one thing that we've noticed over the years, is really this opportunity for non-motorized enjoyment of Lake Champlain and public access in the southern part of the lake. So we're always looking for opportunities to partner projects that could possibly happen down there, and ideas from the folks that live in the southern part of the lake to help support that, as well as the legislature to really think about how we're managing our land around the southern part of the lake. I'm gonna turn it over to Bob, who's gonna talk about contaminants. I'm actually gonna move this way. I have to go testify in House Ag after this, so I'm a little short on time today, but it was really wonderful to meet all of you and see you, and thank you for all you do. And I know it's a tough session, and anything you can do to support water quality. For being here.
Hi, my name's My name's Bob Fisher. I'm the water quality superintendent from South Burlington. I live in Barry. I'm also I was the 2023 New England Water Environment Association president, with originally other members, the top engineering firms, calculators, operators. So I just lived in Vermont for 95 years. I'm also on the operator certification board. And lastly, unlike Andrew, I'm not going skiing today. I'm going to an A&R meeting right after this, but I am the Killington freestyle coach for 25 years, the longest tenure, and I've had multiple Olympians. And lastly, I guess I used up all my time with the intro. I used to give tours when I was the Montpelier chief operator of the wastewater facility. Remember people bring.
I was gonna say, I think I might have been on one of those tours.
So very quickly, unlike everyone else that's here to ask for things that's gonna cost money, oh, that's right, same thing I'm here for. The chloride. Chloride, basically, it's coming down bad. There's 5 streams at least impaired right now, one of them is South Burlington. It's gonna probably trigger a TMDL at the federal level, so we still as an EPA. This is gonna be a serious issue for Vermonters. South Burlington is kind of leading the way. They helped us give some training to Burlington, but we also have a lot of resources compared to a lot of places to reduce salt usage, but over half of it is private. So New Hampshire has a law where they as long as you become a green pro certified, New York also has the same kind of law. You take their trainings for private people. It limits your
We're working on it.
Yeah.
it limits your liability. For additional people that own a mall, they don't want people falling and breaking their legs.
Yeah, we have that bill.
But there you go. Very topical.
That's actually literally after you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's coming. There's nothing we can do about it. You can stop putting every last little bit of salt down now. It's just like phosphorus. It's legacy. It's in the thing. Also, to speak very quickly, my expertise being in biosolids and septic. 55% of Vermonters are on septic tanks that do not treat for PFAS like we can and whatnot. 99.4% of septic. There's only one land application site left. It's probably gonna get closed. It all goes to wastewater plants. It's a huge issue. It's concentrated PFAS in there. I'm not gonna take it really anymore in South Burlington, because why would I jeopardize my E2 biosolids? We put a 5% mix. We do not go to farms. We go to beneficial reuse. It's we have some of the lowest levels in the state, in the country. Vermont, Michigan, and New York both are found the 20 rural parts per billion. We're at like 6. Also, VTC just put Vermont Department of Conservation Residuals just put out a RFP yesterday for a sludge management study. But generally, septic is a huge issue. People are talking about PFAS, whatnot. That's a septic tank. It goes right in your yard. There you go.
And for talk about and
No small issues. I didn't realize.
Yeah. So good things to have on our radar though, so.
And So this is Andrew. I have one last action I'm just going to talk about real brief. I know we are running up against the end of the session here, but and that relates to aquatic invasive species. I just really wanted to reinforce what you may already know, that aquatic invasive species continue to be a significant threat to Lake Champlain and other state waterways. With the discovery of the golden clam in the southern part of Lake Champlain this past summer, there are now 52 known aquatic invasive species in Lake Champlain, and other species that are nearby that may get into the system, such as the round goby that you may have heard about. These aquatic invasive species impact native species and aquatic ecosystem integrity, recreation, including the Lake Champlain fishery, which has an annual value of about $200 million, and also have pretty major impacts to infrastructure. Our ask is the potential for considering a new funding source through a mandatory boat decal program, and that relates to watercraft inspections and certifications, and a high-profile inspection station at key access points. Cooperatively with our partners in Quebec and New York. Obviously, if they are not taking similar actions, then we're not going to be effective. But both of those jurisdictions are taking aquatic invasive species seriously. And of course, we have canals that come up from the Hudson River through New York and down from the St. Lawrence River from Quebec that are potential introduction pathways. So again, hoping to support additional funding through a dedicated program of state inspections. And that is it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jenny.
I know, so good. I do have one follow-up question.
Sure.
One of the things that Denise mentioned was the need for consistency in regulation. And I know Denise is not here, but I'm wondering if, I mean, you are here, could help me out with an example, or like what would be the kind of change that you would envision?
I would believe this probably comes from a long-standing, I've been on for like 15 years, and we have one of the longest. For a long time, we did one of our actions, we have dropped it now, was, because it's kind of coming along anyway, was to take enforcement from ag. Put it into DEC. I think a lot of it is what she's pertaining to.
I see,
But
okay.
we're not necessarily espousing that now, that position.
But
Because we're a consensus group, we have farmers on it.
yeah, fair enough.
But yes, we certainly would want consistent regulations.
Yeah.
Us.
Yes.
I believe that's what she's looking.
Okay,
So
great, thank you,
for
yes.
Mr. Milliken, it would be helpful to get a little email memo from you about the detail, the way you're conceptualizing that decal program. That could just be helpful.
What's the detail program?
Or
Kayaks and canoes.
Oh,
and-
for the,
right,
okay.
to help finance additional areas.
And you talked about all the aspects of it, but if you get them all down, so a quick memo would be helpful to us, as we will pick that through.
And
You bet.
Bowden, I see that you.
Happy to do that.
Sorry, thank you. And Mr. Bowden, you got your hands up, go ahead.
Yeah, just a very quick comment that you have in front of you the action plan that we put together, and our role as a citizens advisory committee is to bring to make connections for you. And I'm very interested to see the S29 coming up immediately after us. We're making a connection between chloride and the action plan and asking for your support for help with that. So it's about making connections, and so happy to see that connection is being made.
Super, thank you. Any other questions? Great, well, thank you so much, and look forward to working on some of these issues, so.
And yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Take the late report.
Thank you.
Champion-based program, I don't know.
Sure,
I'd like to see some of those. It's all a bit behind.
So we've found here in 15 years, we'll call it a win that we mentioned chloride and now you're doing it.
Now we're
It's all
doing it.
because of us.
That's right.
Doing-
Take credit.
doing
You guys are very, you're way on top of things.
Fair enough.
Sorry,
So,
Chair.
we,
Does anyone else want?
a lot of breathing.
Yeah.
So we are gonna go at a break. We're gonna break until 10:45. And As you should.
Just because it helps.
Yes, for sure. Okay, great, and we have a quorum and we are unmuted or muted?
We're unmuted now, but is there any more coming? No.
I think Deputy Secretary is out in the halls. I imagine he'll be joining us, but I don't think Secretary or.
Oh, she was listed. All right,
Oh, yeah, he's talking with Senator Carter.
I just want to grab the right folder here. Oh, it's over here.
Still working off 3.1 or whatever that was.
That is our latest version, though. I think we're about to see some suggestions. So,
Are we on 3.1 or?
we're three,
Official.
you're first.
Great.
3.2 is what I have.
There might be a 3.3.
I have 3.3 over here, guys.
Oh, yeah, oh.
Right here on the website too.
I'm gonna say it on my own. If you want it now.
Yeah, let's have it now, and just have that for context.
Yeah.
I think this does not incorporate your
No.
changes, I think it's just, things that we'd already talked about, so.
Can you pass this to Senator Murray? Thank you.
But we'll have this to refer back to. Okay, so, all right, so the Natural Resources Representative, coming back from a break. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair
Welcome
Watson.
back.
Yes.
Yeah, so I understand that you have some thoughts or suggestions, so we'll let you take it away.
That's correct. Thanks, Chair Watson and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Pete LaFlamme. I'm Director of the Watershed Management Division at Vermont EPC. And as you know, I've been in, I was in a couple weeks ago, just talking about chloride and the concerns of chlorides in our waters here in Vermont, and I'll just review a couple of the points from my earlier testimony, which will form a basis, I hope, for some of the changes we're going to recommend today. But as I spoke about last time, that chlorides are a real problem in our waters. That chloride levels are increasing, especially in some of our smaller watersheds that drain areas of large impervious surfaces. But even in the lake itself, I think you've heard testimony that there is a trend towards increasing chloride levels there. So chlorides are something that we want to address, we need to address as a state. And the bill overall, the underlying concepts in the bill, I think are a great step forward. I think I spoke about how the lion's share of the problem in these small watersheds are large parking lots, sidewalks, areas that need to be de-iced by commercial applicators. And that the commercial applicators sometimes tend to over-apply salt to prevent liability concerns, either at the behest of the owner of the property or themselves. It's a unfortunate situation, both for the applicator in terms of the costs of salt these days, but especially for the effects on our waters. Chloride runs off of these surfaces, is stored temporarily in the margins, and then eventually leaches out throughout the year into the receiving water. That leaching is particularly problematic in the summertime when flows are low in the stream. We get rainfall events in the summer, and that leaching we found is particularly problematic then. There's also runoff of salt, of course, from municipal roads and from the state transportation network. But those are, we're working on managing those, and we'll speak a little bit about that in a few moments. But so commercial applicators taking a step in the right direction. And the reason I say that is, as I spoke about, and as all of you obviously know, there's a tension between having safe impervious surfaces, de-icing impervious surfaces, be they roads or parking lots or sidewalks. We of course need that, and chloride, sodium chloride salt is the de-icer of choice. A number of different alternatives have been tried over the years, and I'm sure they'll continue to be experimented with, but so far really it's salted sand and salt itself that's used. And so we need that, we all want that as a society,
but then a runoff into these watersheds, particularly watersheds that are dominated by impervious surfaces. It's a problem for the water quality. So optimizing the use of salt really is the first and most important step we need to take in this direction. Several other states, Minnesota, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, the province of Ontario have all taken this step, very similar, slightly different in various ways as states are, of course, but have taken this step. I know this legislation is modeled after New Hampshire's program, and that's a very good program. And again, it takes that initial important first step at controlling salt from what we see as really the largest part of the problem right now, which is commercial applicators. We continue to work very cooperatively and well with our agency of transportation, and we're going to partner with them in terms of the effort, which I'll talk about in a few moments. So that's just sort of the backdrop for the changes that we're proposing. I don't know how I can just speak in big picture about this rather than a line by line walkthrough, and then I understand Michael Grady is going to be coming in to actually walk through the language, and we're happy to stay and provide comments at that level if you would like that. Share walkthrough.
So my understanding was that we're, Michael Grady was gonna walk through the changes that we have to version 3.3, which does not include your changes. So, I mean, I suppose, I'm wondering if it makes more sense for you to walk us through those proposed changes?
Okay, I'm happy to do it.
Would that be okay?
I'll say that they sort of hit the four main areas. How we want to deal with municipal roads and municipal road de-icing. And rather than setting up a training program for that at this time, our proposal is going to be to, and the Agency of Transportation has agreed to blend that into their local roads training program. They work with municipalities already in a number of areas doing extensive and important training for municipalities through the local roads program. They currently have a module where they talk about de-icing, and we would work with AOT towards beefing that up to pass along some of the concepts that AOT has pioneered that I spoke about last time. So that's one area. The second area is around record keeping and tracking. We're going to recommend, and I can walk through, I'm not sure which draft we're currently on, but I can walk through the most recent draft that I have in terms of recommending a strike through. But tracking and record keeping is something, especially tracking the import of salt into the state, which is something that, salt comes in at different times and in different amounts. It's really the application of salt and the rate of application. A winter like this winter is very different in terms of salt usage than last winter, for example. So it's really optimizing the use of that salt, not necessarily the import of salt to the state. And that record keeping would be difficult at best and really doesn't get to the issue. It's optimizing the application.
Sorry, which part of that is difficult?
Just the overall concept of identifying and tracking import of salt.
So the application is not, you're not suggesting getting rid of the tracking of the application?
We're gonna suggest having the applicator keep those records rather than submitting those records to the agency.
Go ahead.
That would be helpful for me anyway, is to talk about the language in the draft, not because we are so far along with talking about the draft that if you could tell us specifically in the draft what you're recommending,
Okay,
that would be helpful, because
happy to do that.
rather than talking more broadly.
Okay, I was just sort of setting the stage for my
Oh,
more
okay, sorry.
detailed comments. No, just four general areas, and I'll speak quickly about the last two.
Before we get to that, we have
You
another.
represent DEC?
Yes,
Okay, so I was kind of surprised you said the primary The problem is the commercial applicators. Yeah, and then we're talking about municipalities not really being mandated. So we're gonna cooperate and train.
Right.
That's kind of different. I think that's a change from what we were doing. Well, I had in my mind anyway, is that, you know, we're gonna get these applicators to buy into it, and we're gonna offer them some more carrots than fewer sticks. And just, I want you to keep us on track of that thought.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So are you not suggesting that we're getting rid of the private program?
Correct, Chair Watson, that's, what I'm saying is I think that we're recommending that that be the focus of this bill. The commercial, the private applicators, the folks that are de-icing parking lots and sidewalks, that sort of work. Not that the municipal application and the state transportation network application isn't important. I think we have different ways of approaching those two sources. And I think the problems that we see are most predominant in areas where there are lots of parking lots, lots of sidewalks relative to the size of the watershed. Last time I spoke about Sunnyside Brook, which is that little brook at exit 16 that drains highway, it drains municipal roads, and it also drains large parking lots like at Costco and other stores in that area. The third point is the enhanced monitoring, and I can talk about that. And then finally, the last point is the requirements of covering the salt and the timelines that were suggested here. So just those are the four main areas as we walk through the draft. And I have a draft that is dated yesterday, 2/20 at 2:26 p.m.
Yeah, 3.3.
3.3. Yes, correct.
So your changes are on top of 3.3.
Exactly, that's correct. I just wanted to make sure we were all.
Yes.
Same page, that's it. Oh, actually, check that. I'm sorry. I do have that draft, but I'm operating from I marked up 3.2.
Okay.
We did that markup and we received, we briefed and are all on the same page about 3.2. I don't know how different 3.2 is from 3.3. Hopefully these changes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They're not very different, and your changes would not affect the changes made between you.
Great thing. So I will start then on page 3 of 3.2, where we strike municipal salt applicators in section 1352. It's about the 5th line. It's actually in my draft. It's line 1 of page 3 where it says municipal salt applicators. Because again, we have discussed this internally between agencies and feel like the local roads program is the best way to start that effort up immediately while we stand up the program for commercial applicators. Again, as someone mentioned a moment ago, similar to the way New Hampshire did it when they first began this, they focused on the commercial applicators first, and then learning from that training, eventually segue to the munis. DOT has indicated that they would build this training as part of the training on optimizing salt application as part of their local roads programs. And we would be outsourcing then training specific to the commercial applicators, which is different. The techniques and the BMTs used in parking lots and sidewalks are different than the way muni roads, linear applications are done.
Yes, good.
So two things, well, there are municipal parking lots too, so,
Correct.
you know.
Correct. Yeah.
And schools, I'm assuming you're including schools as municipal, they are municipalities too, are they part of your
program?
It's a great question, Senator Hardy. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if schools rely on the municipality for their salting and sanding, or if they contract that out to commercial.
It's kind of a mix,
Probably a mix.
some of them do their own, some of them use the town, some of them have commercials.
Right.
So it's kind of mixed,
Right.
but they have very big parking lots and a lot of, you know,
You're right.
in our town,
Yes.
so.
Yeah.
I wanna make sure they're covered, and are you going to suggest also language to ensure that the local roads program includes this beefed up training?
There is a call out later on about
Okay.
that. I can't describe that. But we're coordinating with AFT at this point. I would want to check in with them about that.
Okay, cause I mean, I actually suggested this in one conversation we were having, you
Well,
know.
perhaps that's where the idea came from.
But I would want it written out in the draft to say that this is happening, not that I don't trust AOT, if anyone's listening, I do trust you, but just wanting to make sure that it's clear that this is something that we're
Good point.
asking them to do.
And I should mention, I'm sorry, I neglected to mention in the beginning, with me today is Bethany Sargent. She's the deputy director of our division and has been involved quite a bit in this work as well. If you don't mind, we can tag team some of this because it would be.
No worries.
With Senator Hardy's point in mind, which we will address, I think later in the document, we are recommending striking municipal salt applicators from this. In other words, making this effort more specific to the commercial private applicators. And so there's agreement with the rest of page 3. Then on page 4 of my draft, which is the section describing record keeping. We struck, again, we struck municipal, and then also the concept of required submission. I'm on page 4, line 7 on my draft, where it requires submission of those records to the Agency of Natural Resources. We're suggesting that this record keeping be done by the applicator, along with the certification, proof of certification be kept by the commercial applicator. You know, so that they could then eventually, if they needed to, avail themselves of the limited liability provisions that are sort of the quid pro quo for receiving that training and for keeping those records.
There's a question here.
Who's going to? If, it's voluntary.
Correct.
So if they opt in and somebody slips and falls, who's gonna cover the litigation for that? Who's gonna cover that? The state of Rhode Island? They're gonna fund that?
That's not my understanding from this bill. It's my understanding that would, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm going to misspeak here, but that would be sort of a presumption in court that they then, as a result of this law, have that limited liability protection if they're behaving, if they've received the certification and they're keeping the correct records, that they would enjoy that protection. But I'm not sure mechanically how that would work in the court system.
But they're still gonna have to go to court. Right, so it's not gonna be.
That's my understanding, Senator. I'm not, again, I don't pretend to understand the workings of how that would work, but it would provide a defense for them. I'm not sure if that defense would prevent that lawsuit from happening in the first place, or if it would be a defense once they got into court, that would moot out that action.
I mean, I can respond if you would like me.
Yeah, sure.
I think. Recall the New Hampshire testimony about their first litigation or first assertion of the. Protectedness side, that there was litigation, it did go to litigation. And the presumption of protection was upheld. You're probably gonna have 1 or 2 cases where the facts of this liability protection will be litigated. And then it will never, it doesn't mean that there will never be litigation again, but then lawyers will have to counsel their clients to say. Listen, there's less of an opportunity for you to succeed if you go forward because of this.
So we don't have a precedent setting case, yeah.
We don't now. Remember New Hampshire was giddy that one company got like sued because they knew that they were a best management practice or.
Good.
So I wanna make sure that I'm following you, because I was having a little bit of a hard time finding where you were referencing, because so under the data collection. Or reporting section, like you wanted to take out municipalities. From the list, and you had said page 4. But I think. You're on draft 3.2, yeah?
I'm on 3.2 and it's sub 3. Where it says it begins to establish record keeping requirements for commercial salt applicators. It says and municipal salt applicators, so we're recommending striking and unit. And then at the end of that, number 3, it says required submission to the Agency of Natural Resources. We recommend striking that and instead having individual commercial applicators keep their own records in terms of both their certification and then also their application tracking, again, as you know, as that defense against potential liability.
Snre Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think later in the draft. It says that they are to keep their own records. Isn't that right, Michael?
Yes.
I can't find where it is exactly, but so we already did require them to do it, so maybe this is just gray
Well, this,
required submission or what?
this is under, I guess my confusion with your suggestion here is because this is under the umbrella of what are a part of the best management practices for the program, right? So we want applicators to keep
Correct.
records, and I know you're taking out municipalities from, or you want to take out municipalities
Correct.
from this as being a program that municipalities can participate in. But I would assume that if we're just sweeping municipalities into the road program training that's already taking place, that we still want municipalities to keep track of their SALT application.
Correct.
Which is why, having that other language to beef up. If you're taking it out of here, we're gonna ensure that you're doing it over there, and municipalities still need to keep track of their SALT. Right?
We agree they need to keep those records. We are saying we don't feel like it's necessary for those to be submitted to A&R.
But I think what the part that here's my confusion. I'm on, because your page numbers aren't like lining up with mine
I'm sorry.
weirdly, it's okay. So when you say sub 3, I'm on in my draft, that's on
I see.
page 3, line like 21. Which is under the best management practices that are baked into the program. And
I'm sorry, Chair Watson, on
Yeah.
page 4 of your draft, line 3.
so that doesn't, line 3 of page 4 for me is something else.
Well, which draft?
I'm on 3.2.
Okay, I'm on 3.3 now.
Okay, because you had said 3.2 earlier, so I was going off of 3.
I'm sorry, I thought you were looking at 3.3.
No, okay, sorry, so
On 3.3,
on 3, line,
page 4, line 3.
page 4, line 3. Am I the only one having this problem?
Where it says required submission to A&R.
Oh, I see.
That's what they're
Oh,
suggesting.
We're recommending striking the required.
I was misunderstanding. You don't have a strikeout, because if you just had like a strikeout version or a red line version of your suggestions, I think that would be. I think maybe you said.
We do have that, and
think
it's
maybe
done
I
on
must be looking at
3.2. It's done on 3.2.
Where do you have it? Do you have ones that you shared with us? Is it on our website? No, okay.
No, we didn't submit straight through.
No.
Didn't I get it from you?
I sent me to you.
Okay.
Okay, Lee, is this something we could post on the list?
Yes.
Yeah, but I wasn't sure because yeah, fair enough. I thought they were meeting with my.
That's solid.
So essentially what I'm hearing you say is. Anytime it says municipal, get rid of it. Get rid of the required submission to the secretary about the records. But that's just a reference in the best management practices. I don't think later we don't require them to submit it, so maybe that's just inconsistent. And then what else you got?
And which version are we on? 3.3 or
I have both.
what are we using?
John.
I'm fine. Not both. Which one do we go to?
My strike throughs and recommended changes are on 3.2.
Okay.
I was only using 3.3 because I thought it would be easier, but sorry about all the confusion.
Okay, so should we continue going? Yes, let's keep going with your suggestions.
On page 5, it's small d, the Secretary of Natural Resources shall, and this is the tracking of salt imported into the state. The average amount used for the past several years. All of that section, all of D, we recommend striking. That's on 3.2, page 5, line 5.
That's determining the amount of salt applied.
Imported and applied.
Paragraph 3. I'm looking,
Paragraph, yes, paragraph.
it says
3,
determine the amount of salt applied in the state.
Strike that.
Why? You said you wanted to know the amount applied.
No, I said the amount applied is actually the issue, by trying to track the amount applied is.
Yeah.
Would be an extremely difficult exercise. We're treating this as a best management practice. In other words, not a load base, but a reduction. The training, the certification, the reduction, the limited liability, all go to reducing it. But actually trying to calculate the amount put on a parking lot be extremely difficult.
Well, if we can't figure out the amount applied, we're not gonna know if there's a reduction in the amount of salt applied.
If the applicators are following the best management practices in terms of optimizing salt use.
But we won't know if they are unless we track the amount of salt applied.
And it is sort of a form of accountability in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If
Sorry,
I,
the question, go ahead.
if I may, for the record, Bethany Sargent, with the Watershed Management Division, I'm the Deputy Director. I just wanted to point out, so one of the things in talking with New Hampshire about their program, they have, there's 2 issues with the tracking piece. The first is that, many of these commercial applicators are, single employee, 2 employees, and have found some of the tracking requirements very burdensome. The other point is that there is so much variability from one winter to the next in terms of the conditions that would, require one to apply salt, that looking at that data from year to year, it's been really difficult for them to draw any conclusions because of that variability. So focusing on the implementation of the best management practices in terms of salt application is really where their time and effort is best invested. Because of that variability, you really can't make sense of the data on an annual basis in terms of tracking reductions as a result of the overall implementation of the program. That has been New Hampshire's experience.
My recollection from the testimony we got from New York was that they were actually able to track it better. I mean, because one of the things about the New Hampshire program in their testimony was they couldn't really answer any questions about whether or not they reduced the use of salt or if it's actually benefiting their water. So I think baking in this ability to, at least on an estimated basis, figure out how much the salt has been applied as a starting point, that's paragraph 2. And then determine annually, and maybe we say an estimated amount, but unless we can track the amount of salt that's used, we're never gonna know. And if it's reducing, or maybe it's like an average of over 3 years or something to try to account for the variability of winters. I don't know, but there has to be some kind of measurement. That's what you guys do. You measure things.
We measure things, we would be measuring the salt concentrations of the water, which is the ultimate test, and the delivery pathways. There's a huge disconnection in the delivery pathways between how much an applicator is putting on today or tomorrow or next year, and then the delivery into the water. We'll talk more about that when we get to the monitoring section, but in these non-point source, which is what this is, non-point source type programs, we depend on implementation of best management practices, and the best management practice of optimizing the use of salt and therefore reducing the use of salt overall over time will result in the reductions in the receiving water, but we're not going to see an immediate you put less salt on today and the receiving water recovers tomorrow. The ground around these parking lots and sidewalks have a high concentration, and that's going to leach out over time. So it's really implementing the best management practices and removing the possible stigma of insuring against liability from slip and fall and those other types of accidents. That would help the applicators put on less.
I understand that, but
I don't
feel like unless we're doing some kind of measuring, we're not gonna know.
Yeah, so Senator Williams, you had a question. I guess because I think having the data is important. I get that measuring it in, that you're already measuring it in the receiving waters.
Yes.
But there is, I think there is an importance to, knowing what's coming in, what is on the front end of that faucet. And it's the concern I have, because I want to hear you. You know what I mean? Like, I want to understand what the issue with the problem is, with getting that data. And I could understand that it would be a lot to try to make a statewide estimate as to what was happening in application, especially if you don't have visibility with all of the potential applicators participating in the program. And like that, I think there's a good reason to, have an estimate, like to say that as the best that you could do would be an estimate.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I'm not understanding necessarily why you would want to track the imports, particularly because they're very few. Comes on trains, or like there's just fewer data points that you would need to collect to know that. So at least the part about it, importing it into the state feels more doable to me. So let me back up. I'm not understanding the difficulty with collecting the data around imports. And I'm also not sure about if we change it to an estimate, based at, why would you not want that? Does that make sense?
I understand your questions,
Yeah.
Chair Watson. In terms of importing it into the state, the rate of import into the state does not necessarily correlate on any given year with the usage.
True.
They may get it by the train car load and then stockpile it a winter like this winter. Some municipalities we've been reading in the paper, I'm sure you have as well, have already gone through their salt.
Totally understand. Totally understand that, but even looking in aggregate over years, to see the trend, like we imported twice as much, or like it is a proxy for the application.
A very rough proxy for the
Yeah.
application. Yes, over years, you could potentially see a declining trend in the tons of salt coming into the state. I'm not sure that information really is effective in terms of controlling the application of salt to these small impaired watersheds from parking lots and sidewalks. It's just, the correlation there would be very, very, very low, I think. Our goals in a program like this would again be to optimize, to reduce therefore the amount of salt being applied to these private sources by commercial applicators.
And let me say one more piece about that. When thinking about a program like this, one of the metrics of success is using less salt. So how are we measuring that metric? Like I'm feeling the need if we institute this program, how do we measure the success of it? That we've used less salt. And so like I feel like we need, if we're spending any taxpayer money on it, I want to be able to point at results. And so I need there to be results.
I think the ultimate results will be seen in the receiving waters. We're not seeing this as an effective way of measuring that success because of the sort of discontinuity of operations from importing it in the state, from an applicator, coming up with a admittedly rough estimate as to how much they put on a particular parking lot or a particular sidewalk. It's just that data is going to be rough at best, and we're not sure about the efficiency and the accuracy in using that as a measure, instead pointing to the concept of certification and reduction of application as a really important best management practice towards solving the problem. I understand, I agree with your overall concept. It's just, I think some of those connections and some of the uncertainty multiplied in several different areas, getting to.
Thank you for letting me push back. I appreciate you.
I don't know what's.
Bearing with me on this, so thank you.
I understand exactly where you're going and the logic, and I'm just saying that we're recommending that due to that uncertainty, it not be included, but.
Thank you. And there's multiple other comments. So I saw Seth first and then, I'm sorry. Senator Bonder is Senator Mack, and then Senator Hardy, did you have one?
Yeah, well, they might cover it, but not.
I frankly think I agree with the chair. So talk about is there the difficulty, if there is difficulty in gaining that knowledge about the amount of salt being imported, because if it is something, that there are relatively few, measurement not coming on trains, whatever, it's clearly helpful information to know that, and whether it be over time that decline in usage of salt. And I realize that the year to year is almost valueless, but the 10-year trend would tell us something. If we see that it's still going up despite this, then we go, oh, we still got a problem. So is part of the reason you are resistant to doing that because you think it's going to be difficult to do it, or just because you don't see the correlation?
I'd say both, Senator Baumgart's, but again, that's our recommendation.
So help me with the first part. What makes you think why is it difficult to gain the data?
I'm not currently aware of how we could attach to the folks that are bringing that salt into the state. I'm not sure what regulatory mechanism we would be able to use to get the importers of that salt into Vermont. How we could, I'll say, force them to report their import rates of salt and their stockpiling of it. I mean, folks that we regulate, adding reporting requirements to them, although never makes them happy, but we have that ability to be able to add conditions to permits or other areas that we regulate. We don't currently regulate salt importers. So finding them, getting them to report to us may be difficult.
Thank you, go ahead.
I mean, I get what you're saying, I also get what the chair's saying, if we go. I understand, you know, if you're trying to do this at the wholesale level, the problem's there. But how big of a, you know, how many people out there do we have that are selling bulk salt, you know, by the ton to commercial operators in the state?
It's a great question, Senator Beck, and I don't know.
Okay, well, so let me just, so here, continue on, not knowing, but I think from what I understand is that is a very limited number. Barrett's, they have, you know, and I don't know if they sell to municipalities or just commercial operators. I also don't know if municipal operators sell to commercial operators. But whatever that retail occurs, that retail sale, that would be the place to understand how much salt is putting down, because commercial operators aren't taking any more than they can put down. What I don't know is how many businesses are we touching there?
We can certainly look into that and come back with a better answer. I don't have that information.
Yeah, I don't.
Good question, thank you, go ahead.
Along the same lines, I don't think the bill says or intends to say, we wanna know how much each individual commercial applicator put on each individual parking lot. I mean, that would be insane, lots of data.
Right.
But what it seems to me that would be less difficult, if at the end of the season, we ask the commercial applicators, participants in the program, how many tons of salt did you buy this year, or use this year, and they should know that. And they just report it once, and then we get the data over time, and then we sort of adjust it based on levels of winter. There must be climatologists must have some kind of severity of winter indication thing that you can use to, you know, make some kind of calculation on the ratio of salt to severity of winter.
That would be the next layer beyond retail.
Exactly, so it's just, you know, you just find out, are the people who've done this program over time using less salt? And has the state over time, when they've implemented the best practices, I bet that AOT has data on the amount of salt that they've used over time. And then municipalities over time, and that's all it is sort of on aggregate per season, adjusted for severity of winter, can we see a trend of declining use of salt?
Total mass of salt used in the day on a particular winter. Right.
Yeah, exactly, that kind of estimate, to see if this is having an impact. Not the, no pun intended, granularity of what it sounds like you thought we meant. That's not, I think that would be hard to do, but on the gross level, we should be able to do it.
We can certainly dig into that further. I mean, we do work with our AOT very well, and we have their entire transportation system under a permit as a result of it's so-called TS4 permit. It's a stormwater permit that covers the entire state-owned transportation network in the state. We work very collaboratively with AOT, and I'm sure we can talk to them about those numbers. In terms of municipals and commercials, other than the large municipalities, the Burlingtons and Willistons, which we also have a similar permit to the TS4 permit called an MS4 permit for municipal, but that only applies to, I think, 13 or 14 municipalities in the state. The other municipalities we don't directly regulate. We can certainly talk with them about supplying that information. I think one level would be identifying the commercial salt importers, as Senator Beck was describing a moment ago. So there's that level, how much gets brought into the state. Then there's the second level of how much Colchester used or how much AOT used this winter versus the winter before. That would be a secondary level. And then the third level would be the commercial applicators, which we don't have, you know, any means of really.
Right, but this bill creates a means. Anybody who is who's gone through the program and become a certified commercial applicator, you get the data from. The ones that don't participate, you don't get the data from them, but at least the ones that do participate. You ask them every year, how much salt did you use? They know that, if they, they should be able to tell you that, they're running a business, they know how much they spent on salt. And then they themselves can see how it's declined, hopefully. And oh, there's a spike because we actually got a real winter, but.
Right.
I don't know, this is creating a mechanism to have that kind of collection of data from a source of applicators. And the same for municipalities that go through the roads program training. Just ask them once a year. Every May.
Jude from my.
Senator
Yeah.
had a question, and then Senator.
Just a comment, I think, we don't mind salt in Vermont, so it's gotta come across, the state board. Which means the Department of Transportation probably has, I don't know if there's a classification for salt that, where they would actually have to keep track of that, but. I'm thinking that it's easier than we're making it out to be. And you need, as a part of an equation, if you want to see how much you use, you gotta know how much comes in. The only thing you really can't track is the stuff that comes in a 40-pound bag for hardware stuff, so, I don't know, maybe we need to make it a classification, so that people coming in with salt have to register with the state.
Senator Williams, I'm happy to go back and come up with better answers to some of your very appropriate questions.
I think you answered my question, but so my question was gonna be. Do our municipalities report to DEC how much salt they purchased or applied during any given year?
Not currently, Senator.
No, okay, none of them do that. Okay.
Go ahead.
But they have to budget, so they know how much salt they're gonna order, because if they don't order it inside that window, they're not gonna get it.
Right, but that doesn't necessarily get to DEC.
Right.
Like I asked my guy, I said, how much do you buy salt a year? He came back in 2 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. The data is out.
Never gets to DEC.
Exactly, it's just a matter of somebody telling you, but I don't think that's that hard. Well, I mean, you're the one that does it, so I don't wanna assume,
So
but.
I appreciate the questions and I understand the logic behind them, and I will go back and
Yeah.
investigate this further.
Right, like I do wanna make sure that I know I was pushing back, we're all sort of pushing back in our own ways, but I also want you to know that like I hear you about the difficulty and that it's. Yeah, so I wanna think about if there are ways to address your concerns. I'm open to seeing if that's possible.
Thank you.
But I'm also hopeful that but I'm also. I do think, some level of reporting, I think, would be advisable.
I
So,
understand.
yeah, so thank you. So to be continued on that one, should we keep going? And then I am hoping still that we can get to a little bit of markup with our ledge council, perhaps by 11:45. Do you think that's?
I'll speed it up.
Well, and I know we're asking a lot of questions, and I think that needs to take as long as it needs to take, but that's putting out there and, a hope that we can be transitioning to on.
I understand.
Yeah.
So our recommendation is to strike all of that. So all of what comes under small d, which again on the 3.2 draft is page 5, line 5, striking the rest of that section. For the reasons that I was just suggesting. We go on with finding and striking municipal in the document. The next real section of discussion will be on, again, in draft 3.2, page 8, under number 3, which is on line 12 of page 8 of 3.2, striking require, that state, municipal and privately owned facilities for the storage of salt, within 100 feet, 100 yards, I'm sorry, need to be undercover, before 2030, striking 4, requiring, that salted sand have the same, requirement, but instead focusing on, the final part, which is 5 on the top of page 9, identifying funds, implied in this are costs. The concern is how many of these situations exist out there, and in total, what will be the costs of doing that covering, of these salt facilities, and first estimating that before setting forth the requirements. So that was the logic there. But that, you know, we would be mapping them, we would be establishing best management practices for managing them, and then finally identifying costs and funding sources to do that work before we set forth the requirements to move them or cover them.
Sorry, can you just give me the logic? Why do you want to strike that section?
Again, we're fine with mapping where they are, we're fine with establishing best management practices and education program for those situations, and then finally, we're fine in terms of identifying the costs and then funding sources that would be used to do that work. The 2 sections we're striking are the requirements at this time, but instead wanting to investigate the total costs and how we're gonna pay for it.
But why would you? The timelines are quite far. And I'm happy to have a conversation about the timelines if that's the concern. Because don't we ultimately want these salt sheds to be covered?
Covering the salt sheds or moving them away from bodies of water, it's certainly important. I think the concerns were establishing those requirements before we understood the extent of and cost of the issue. That's the recommendation.
I'm also wondering about, can these things not go hand in hand?
I'm sorry.
Can these things not go hand in hand?
Perhaps there's, again, I can certainly have further internal discussions, maybe adjusting the timelines. But I think it's important to understand the size and total cost of the issue. You know, the money we're putting out on the ground now, as you know, go to an incredible range of imperatives.
And other thoughts, comments, questions?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
it just seems to be thinking about private plans. You just have to set that one because if there've been proximity, then, that just can't exist. You just can't do that. So
Wait, what?
you can't allow, we have to fix, if they're private piles of sand, which people are using for commercial purposes, this need to get covered. It needs to get salt, salt, it needs to get done. And if we can find some funding, which is great, but it still have to get done, because it's bleeding into the waterways, you just can't let it go on.
Yes, good.
I understand your point about not wanting to require something before we know how much it's gonna cost. Or how we might pay for it. And I think having some target to get the work done is really helpful. Otherwise, we're not holding ourselves accountable collectively. So. I wonder about just having the mapping and the best management practices done, and or maybe mapping and sort of
we need to figure out how many of them they are and where they are, and then have maybe a report back. That with a recommendation about a timeline or something like that. I also just gonna put a plug in here about like, if there are these salt sheds that are close to water in two little towns that could maybe share a salt shed and do it so that they're not next to water, like something about like consolidating salt sheds in better places, maybe by county level, for example, I don't know. But like,
Great
what,
thought.
you guys time having their own salt shed, I mean.
Yeah.
So you guys have one that's like easier and it would probably be cheaper to cover one big one than 10 little ones, I don't know. It seems like an opportunity to like put that in and just say, hey, consolidating your salt sheds might be a good idea, it would probably be cheaper and better.
The one that jammed into St. Johnsbury probably covered 3 counties.
Oh, where, yeah, is it next to the river though?
No, they found a railroad parcel and strong arm their way in there and put something, you could probably see it from the space station.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Everybody use it?
I don't know who knows do it, but it's enormous.
Is it enormous? I don't know, it just seems like, I know there are these little salt sheds all over the place and it will be expensive to cover a lot of them, but sharing them would be. Trying in every possible way I can to.
I should add too that we have struck the private contractors from mapping. Because again, the difficulty in acquiring that information, where all of the different private commercial applicators are keeping their salt, you know, the little ones, the big ones, the medium ones. We can map the munis and we can certainly map the AOT facilities, but trying to identify and map all of the privates would be a very extensive effort trying to get that data.
Is any permit required for commercial applicator that they can just put the file where they want to?
Correct. We have no permitting authority in our department. I don't know about other departments. I don't suspect they do, but I know in our department, we don't have any permitting authority, any regulatory authority at all over the private commercial applicators. And then the last large set of changes in the interest of time on page 10 of 3.2, the A&R enhanced monitoring of fluoride. We recommend striking that entire section. We do extensive monitoring. We have a number of different techniques we can look at, from remote sensing based techniques on impervious area. We found really good correlation, of course, with impervious area and watershed size to direct our in-stream monitoring. We've come up with different ways of optimizing in-stream monitoring using fluoride sensors and telemetry equipment. We do extensive monitoring of this, you know, that necessary to develop PMCLs, that necessary to produce our biannual 303D list of impaired waters, but some of the requirements, in other words, we're doing a lot of this work already in a number of different ways, and recommend striking the specificity here, particularly determining monitoring at physical discharge points, because again, a lot of the delivery into streams from leaching along roadsides, from leaching areas adjacent to parking lots, it's not a point source discharge. So there is no specific discharge point. It's leaching out of the watershed, and we can attribute the likely sources from the nearby surfaces, but it's not like looking at, say, a discharge from a wastewater treatment facility, a point source going in, and then downstream water quality impacts from that. This is more of a watershed wide situation, certainly with areas of increases in areas of lesser contribution, but we're recommending striking this section because again, we do quite a bit of this type of monitoring already, but not, it's a site-specific determination how we're doing it. We've identified fluoride impaired water, developed fluoride TMDL, as Tim Claire came in from our division and testified to. That's our recommendation.
And do you treat, like, I understand that for runoff from parking lots or from roadways is not point source. But I'm sure there probably are point sources along the way, leading into a body of water, so.
There
Do you
could be,
treat those point sources, do you measure those point sources that would contribute?
not specifically, no, because again, the time of contribution. If we're looking at the worst case situation in a water body, it could be during those late August, early September, low flow periods, so-called 7 to 10 flows. When the stream is at its lowest point, if you get a precip event, then the leaching from the previous stored chlorides are going in. In terms of point sources from, say, drop-in parking lots, the grates you see in parking lots where the water goes down, a lot of those drop inlets are then piped underground directly to waters. But the time of delivery would be during periods of melt from the application of the chloride. It may not be necessarily depending on what's going on in the watershed and in the stream in terms of flows, it's pretty complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're recommending, rather than having specific instructions to the secretary as to how to monitor, instead relying on our processes for monitoring waters, for developing lists of impaired waters, and then developing TMDL for cleanup. Again, the tension, as I spoke about when I first started talking, the tension between de-icing surfaces and maintaining chloride water quality standards in waters is real, and it exists across the northern tier. Many states have moved to, not many states, some states, again, Wisconsin, Minnesota, New Hampshire are 3 states we're aware of that have moved towards this certification model. But it's a good first step and an important first step, and we really recommend that. But I don't think this is going to be necessarily a panacea given that tension. And in some cases, watersheds that are heavy with impervious surfaces, it's going to be a real challenge. And speaking honestly, it's going to be a real challenge to get the reductions in salt necessary to meet our water quality standards without, having chaos on roads and parking lots. But
Fair enough. Go ahead.
So I'm a little confused, so it's in both 3.2 and 3.3, section 3, it's the bottom of page 9 in both of them. You're suggesting deleting that entire section?
Section 3, which is titled A&R Enhanced Monitoring, yes, I'm suggesting striking that whole section.
But you are doing monitoring,
Yes.
and so why is this a problem if you're already doing it?
We're doing it, but sometimes in different ways than that suggested here, and some of the ways suggested here are not really realistic or appropriate for certain situations, like identifying, monitoring physical discharge points. Sometimes it's not a single physical discharge point, it's more of a watershed source.
Yeah, but this is only if that is found, then we would require that. So if nothing is found, if there's not a discharge point, then you wouldn't have to do it. Say, oh, there's no pipe going into this, so we're not gonna do that. And the rest of it is, begin regular monitoring, and if you've already begun, then check, you've already begun the chloride level in that water, and investigate potential acute and diffuse contamination sources, so such as impervious sources. So you can say that road that goes along the river here, that's the source, it doesn't seem like this is that onerous, and if you're already doing some of this monitoring, wouldn't it overlap a little bit with what you're doing?
Perhaps not, I think we're just recommending that to strike it, because a lot of this sort of work is already going on, and
Is there
confusing.
a part of statute that already outlines this that we could at least refer to and say, hey, make sure you're doing that?
I think it's part of our overall requirement to manage the waters of the state and to achieve water quality standards, so it's not specific to chloride. I mean, we do a lot of monitoring for a lot of different pollutants, from the 5,000 square mile Champlain watershed and a phosphorus TMDL there, to PFASs now, to chlorides, to all sorts of things. So our monitoring changes year to year. It focuses on different pollutants year to year, and it uses different techniques, sometimes remote source techniques. Sometimes going out and filling bottles in the field, sometimes using monitoring equipment, telemetry
Yeah.
sensors. I mean, so. Right, we have a very
I guess the thing,
extensive and complicated monitoring program.
Yeah.
And so we're just recommending that we don't keep this specific language to do this one.
I guess the thing that overall is a little. I don't know what the right word is, frustrating, disappointing, confusing, I'm not sure. Is that some of the things that you're objecting to the most in the draft, or the things that measure whether or not this thing works that we're doing? And it seems to me that we would wanna measure whether or not this effort works, because if it's not working, then maybe we just don't do it. So, you know, we have to measure how much salt is being used and whether the water's getting cleaner. And that's basic, I know that's not exactly how it works, but you know what I mean? And in both cases, you're saying, no, actually remove that part of the draft. So I'm wondering if the way it's structured, the monitoring and measuring is structured in a way that's difficult for you all to do for whatever reason. Can you come back to us with suggestions for language about how do we measure the salts that's used? You know, we made some suggestions, so for all 5 of us have made suggestions there, and then how we can measure the water results and actually have it tied to this program in a way that is not right now. It's just more general. Maybe there's something already happening, maybe we connect it to that.
I understand, Senator Hardy. Yes, I'd be happy, especially in the former circumstance that you described, the measuring of the application or the overall usage of salt. I'll certainly go back and have conversations around that and recommendations there. And again, the monitoring, it's not that I just want to emphasize the point I'm trying to make. It's not that we don't do the monitoring or not that we shouldn't do the monitoring, we do. And we agree with that. It's more just the specificity of the language and the inclusion of the language was the objection. So I should certainly go back and chat about that. I'm happy to do that.
So realizing that we are running short on time, thank you, appreciate that. And what I am feeling like, before we can necessarily do some draft markup, I think we as a committee need to have a discussion about, actually, let me back up. You have 7 minutes. One possibility is that going through the changes to 3.3 would be a short enough thing to do in that time that we could do that. So the other thing I'm feeling though is I'm wanting to have a discussion with the committee about the proposed changes that we just heard.
Yeah.
So perhaps, because I'm feeling that that's more timely and like potentially any further changes would come out of that committee discussion. So I apologize. I think, can we, I mean, I'll leave it to you if you want to stick around or not, but I think we need to digest, I'd like to digest together what we just heard. Instead of going over the 3.3. Does that make sense? I apologize.
No worries.
Thank you. Okay, so, I think we should take the big picture changes sort of one at a time, and we'll get as far as we get. So starting with like removing municipalities from the program, beefing up the, roads program that already exists. What are folks' thoughts about that?
What's the language?
What's the language?
Do that.
Yeah, they suggested some, they do have some language suggested, if, in their markup version. But I think it's a good idea. I did suggest it at one point, mainly because I think it will keep the program a little cheaper and more focused. But I also wanna make sure that the municipal roads program is sufficiently, robust, that they're actually covering this and proving that people are using this, the best management practices and learning from it.
And I would add, before I forget, that I wanna make sure that schools, as technically municipalities, are either allowed to participate in the state's program or that they can participate in the program that's envisioned in this draft.
Yes,
They've gotta be covered somewhere.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that I think the focus on the commercial is good, and I've heard from some municipals and they're kind of wondering, they were asking me like, why are we getting wrapped into this? We already do all this training through the state,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair, like, we don't have to duplicate a program, let's just beef up the program we have, I think.
I think that makes sense. And you probably walked through plenty of town sidewalks that have way too much salt on them, so. With your dog.
Yeah. Okay, so that sounds good, and I have not digested the changes, so I just need to know where some beefed up language is about that the program that exists will cover this and make sure that it includes parking lots and sidewalks as well. Not just road maintenance, so that's how I understood it, was road maintenance. So if parking lots and sidewalks are not included, that should be a part of the.
Absolutely, yeah.
Of it. The second thing was about the record keeping and tracking. What do we want to do with those suggestions?
If our focus is on the commercial, then I think we either need to have the people that participate in the program report, or the better metric would have the people that are selling retail to commercial applicators to report, because that would cover people that are in the program or not. But I just don't know how many people thought. I mean, I hear the name Barrett's a lot, like I think they sell all over the state, I just don't know enough about who those people are now.
It seems to me like the connection to the program would be easier if we just require anybody who's participated in the program and has certification to annually in June. Say how much salt they use that year.
Yeah.
On a tonnage
That would
basis.
be a very accurate measure of the people that are.
Yeah, and whether or not we can get some references on that data.
Well, and I wonder if, thinking about the publicly accessible part of it, because I do want there to be some level of accountability to say, like, is understanding that there's gonna be spikes, but hoping that there's some long-term trends. I would love for that data to be available in aggregate, I don't need to know, how Joe's plowing did. But is the program effective in helping people reduce the amount of salt that they're using? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And maybe, well,
I don't wanna create another sort of.
yes, like a database, I understand.
Yeah, it just.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I think from the commercial applicator perspective, and I don't want them to feel like, hey, this one winter was worse, and they had to get more, or maybe they picked up a couple contracts, and so they're putting out a little bit more, like somehow that we're just be like, trying to identify increase in their manual.
Right, that's fair.
Just want to put the right amount of salt.
Yeah, exactly. It's not meant to be punitive, it's just meant to be. Evaluation.
It was really an evaluation of the program. Well, and I also wonder, here's an argument against my point. Just that we would not know how much they're using now. To see like before they're part of the program, you don't know that the drop. Do you know what I mean? Like that's.
You can ask them.
Yeah.
I don't know, yeah. And I know that not all of them are gonna be as sophisticated enough to have all that deep, but I think most people know how much salt is a big expense for a lot of people.
Yeah.
They know how much they paid for it.
Yeah.
They know how much.
I don't think they would know that.
Okay. That I like the suggestion of understanding the retail side of it, because that's a bigger universe, like we just capture more there. Wondering what kind of language we might need to do that. I realize that's not necessarily like a very clear directive. I'm wondering, can I ask your opinion?
A corollary, something you could compare to is how the Agency of Agriculture tracks fertilizer.
Right.
That's sold in the state. That every fertilizer dealer is registered, pays an inspection fee, and has to report annually, and some of them have to pay tonnage fees. So honestly, you don't necessarily need the fees, you probably will to put in for your, but you're gonna need a program to identify and then put a requirement on whomever is selling salt at retail in the state. And so that is not existent right now.
Senator Beck, you were the one suggesting it. How do you feel about that?
I don't know if you can charge a fee for them just to tell you how much salt they send here.
But if we had a free registry to say, we wanna know who you are, and we wanna know how much salt you're selling.
Yeah, it's all I wanna know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that is there someplace, in some agency in the state. We have an agency of common.
If they would have salt specific data.
Yeah,
I doubt that anybody collects that specific.
there might be some estimates.
Yeah, can ask.
Good.
What I was gonna say is, well, I appreciate that, and I think Michael's suggestion, I mean, that was sort of where my head was going as I was listening to Senator Beck, but I think I said this already, is that I think we should keep it focused on this program and be like, how much are the people in this program using? And not make it bigger, because once we make it bigger, it's gonna be more expensive and be more of a pain and for them. And then I think that will capture these people who are like, what the heck, how did I get wrapped up in this? So
Yeah.
it's this voluntary program that if you do it, you do the training, you get the benefits from it, and we're asking you once a year to tell us how much salt you use. And, just send us an email.
Yeah, that really is the decision. Do you wanna know how much these people that are participating put down, or do you wanna know how much everybody's putting down?
Yeah.
This is just a policy.
It seems to me like that could be the next step if we're not seeing reductions in salt, is to be like, okay, now we need to actually like. Really, because the fertilizer came about because of the phosphorus problem, so, if the salt problem continues to be bad, then we take bigger actions. This seems like a nice voluntary first step.
There.
Yeah. Okay, we are over time, and we have 2 other topics to go over, so we'll make some space to talk about these next time. Don't think we are. I had at one point been hoping to vote it out, but I think. Based on I think we need to talk about this some more, and I also, as I understand it, Mr. Laflamme, you're gonna be doing a little bit more work to see if there are some more compromising type of language based on the conversation that we've had.
Yes.
Is
we'll
that-
do that.
Okay, that would be helpful. And we'll put in another committee discussion on S29. And we'll try to also schedule some markup to solidify that discussion into some new draft.
Do you want a new draft that takes municipalities out of the program next time, or do you want to wait?
Only if what I was hearing from the committee is that we want to take municipalities out provided that there is language to beef up the existing municipal roads training
Okay.
to include parking lots, sidewalks, ensure that, figure out where schools are taught in that, where what programs are available to schools. And I would extend that to other flavors of municipality. I just, it doesn't, this is a kind of a weird one, but like the Green Mountain Cemetery is a municipality.
Yeah, municipal application.
Right, like
Yeah.
who is.
There's a
Green-
definition of municipality in the statute, so we should just.
Yeah, it goes down to fire districts.
Okay,
If it's school districts, it includes cemetery associations, it includes.
right, and so is the state's municipal roads
No,
training available to Green Mountain Cemetery, to fire districts, et cetera, like anybody who wants to. So I feel like there's a mismatch there, so we gotta,
that training is for those that get a part of the municipal road budget. Because that's where the training bucket comes in, if you want the money, you gotta get training. And cemetery associations don't get state money for their roads.
so somehow I wanna make sure that this is available to them, you know what I mean, and then they're technically municipalities. Sorry, I'm going to, I think you understand what I'm trying to say.
that.
We'll have to have V-Trans in, because they'll be like, no.
Right, I mean, if they could participate in the program and not necessarily the state training, you don't need to, yeah. Yeah, anyway, I think we're on the same page. Okay, thank you, everybody, thank you for staying a little later, my apologies. Yeah, well, going like, okay, so we're gonna adjourn.
No, I think they just adjourned.
No, that's not.
Every person has. Mr. Short.